is KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank.
What's up, y'all? This is One Royal Way here on Kansas City Sports Network. I'm Joel Penfield, Jordan Foote, and Josh Keiser joining me as always. Happy trade deadline day, gentlemen. How are we doing?
I feel like I need a cigarette, man. I was just like on such an adrenaline rush like all afternoon, and my team was like barely doing any, like maybe a rumor here or there, but really pretty quiet, all things considered. And I just like, I was on a high like nobody's business. So I'm coming down from that and looking forward to talking about everything with you guys.
Look, speaking of high, man, I think some people out there need something stronger than a cigarette after Tuesday, because like tempers were flaring. And granted, I did jump the gun a little bit, but I did tweet and put in the tweet pending late announcements, because last year the Merrifield deal came late, and then I think it was Lesky that brought up the Cam Gallagher deal also got announced late. So like I wasn't completely ruling out that they weren't going to make any moves, but then people were replying, fire Piccolo, the whole team needs to relocate. But I was like, okay, I muted the thread instantly. And then people calmed down, and I saw that the amount of replies went from like 40 to like 31. And then I checked before the pod. So like people started deleting tweets, people calmed down, and maybe, got something a little bit stronger than a cigarette. But to answer your question, Joel, I'm doing good, and I'm excited to be back.
Yeah, the trade deadline is always fun because it's like the couple days before you start to see some moves trickle in, and it's like, all right. And then there's always that one big move in the middle of the day, and then everyone just kind of sits around in a staring contest for about 3 hours. And then that last hour is just pure chaos. And it kind of got that way for a little bit. Jack Flaherty to the Orioles with like 10 minutes to go. And then a bunch of other deals kind of trickle in there about for the last like 20 or 25 minutes after the 5 Central deadline. It is a lot of fun. The Royals, it felt like they were just going to kind of sit there and not do anything. And I fired off a tweet that I probably shouldn't have. I kind of jumped the gun on it too. That was before, it was like 5 minutes before the Yarborough trade came through. And then obviously the Scott Barlow one. And at that point, I'm like, okay, carry on. I jumped the gun on this one. I'm willing to admit that I was wrong and should not have said some of the things that I said. And I'm sure the people in my comment section probably did the same thing, because I started seeing deleted tweets on my thread as well.
I saw your guys' tweets, and I was trying to tweet something along the lines of, I think it's important to say and remember that the Royals came off sweeping the division leaders. So let's keep that in mind. Why mess with the
yes. And let's get to that right now, because I do want to talk about that. I don't want to miss kind of the forest for the trees with the series that they just had over the weekend. Before we do that, the show, as always, brought to you by Kansas City Strength and Conditioning. Be sure to check them out if you have a baseball or softball player in the area that needs a place to train. We actually have an interview coming up later this week that Josh is going to do with a member of the Royals that has trained at KCSC for the last couple of off seasons. So be sure to check that out later this week. If you've listened to the show, I've referenced him before, but nice little teaser there. So this past weekend against the Minnesota Twins, I don't know about if it felt this way for you guys, but it was so cathartic. The team needed that, obviously, because they're the ones playing day in, day out. I feel like we needed that because we have tried to do so much of like threading a fine needle of trying to find the little things that are going well through just loss and loss and loss that piles up. A win here and there that we can really give us some stuff to talk about. But a full series that the Royals swept. First 3-game win streak all year. They finally got off the schneid there. And it was against a team that is battling for first place in a playoff spot in this division. It wasn't like, they were beaten up on, it wasn't like it was the White Sox or the A's or something like that. Like, it was a team that is possibly going to play in October that made a couple of moves around the trade deadline as well. So really good to see. They needed that moment, and Bobby Witt Jr. needed that moment on Friday. That was, I don't think there's anything that's going to top that the remainder of this year. They're still going to win games. It's not like they're done doing that. But to have a game in which you blow the lead in the ninth inning, and then it goes into extras and you give up the lead, and it's going into the ninth, and it's like, oh, here we go again. It's just another, kind of kick in the nuts loss in a season with many of those. And Bobby Witt Jr. comes up and hits a walk-off grand slam against Yohan Duran, one of the best closers in baseball. And for Bobby, he went 4 for 5, 6 RBIs on the night with that home run. And for him to have that moment, in a high leverage situation, which is a situation he has struggled with in his entire career. The clutch has not necessarily been his forte. And we have talked at length about his struggles against fastballs, especially really high velocity. And he turned around 102 miles an hour in off the plate, barreling into his chest, gets the hands in and hits a walk-off grand slam. I mean, that is just such an incredible moment for him. Like, I think that's kind of going to be that light bulb moment we can look back on, because he goes 4 for 5, nearly hits for the cycle on the next night. We've talked about these moments a couple of times throughout the year where they've had these kind of galvanizing wins. And it's like, is this the circle the calendar moment for this team of, can they start to string some of these wins together? I think that game on Friday might actually be that. It was flat out awesome. That's a Christmas Eve game for sure.
To do that right before the trade deadline gives you like a weird oomph, like a little extra momentum going into the deadline. And we didn't really know where that momentum was going to go. And then we just saw some deals running through. So it feels like at least the temperature of Royals Twitter is a little bit room temperature.
Just a bit. Just a little bit.
Which is better than full-on nuclear meltdown. So it's an improvement, I think, of that. The one thing I wanted to say about that Grand Slam in particular, I saw it on Twitter. I think it was Talking Baseball, said it was the fastest pitch that was outside the strike zone ever hit for a home run in the StatCast era, which is
wow. It even goes back. That actually goes back to pitch tracking in 08.
Yes. Yeah. So that might be up to this point the most Bobby Witt Jr. stat of we've seen, right? The fact that it was out of the strike zone and put in the seats is absolutely like kind of what we've seen from Bobby a little, is like as far as he's chasing and he's still able to put a good swing on it. But the fact that it was 102, 103 or whatever it was, and he was still able to do it in that moment.
Barreling into him, into the chalk.
Yeah. It was not a flat pitch whatsoever. And it was a good at bat anyways. Like the whole at bat, he battled, man.
9 pitches. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So it was really good to see. It kind of set the tone. And then we got a pitcher's duel on Sunday that was really fun to watch too. So kind of had a little bit of everything this weekend. It was good to see.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I guess my point, it's kind of, I'm cheating a little bit. It's not necessarily the last week, but there was that tweet from Mike Kurland that went around about Brady Singer and his changeup usage. He said 10% in his last 4 starts. So I dove into the numbers a little bit. Like, there's no sugarcoating it. Brady Singer's had a rough year. His ERA is 5.46, but the FIP is 4.07. The expected ERA is a little bit lower than the actual ERA. Like, the disparity for him, and I kind of shy away from expected numbers sometimes, but with him, it's legitimately a massive gap. And like the expected stuff is not always as it seems. Since June 1st, though, 3.94 ERA, 2.28 walks per 9, 51 strikeouts to 15 walks. And he's used to change up 9.3% of the time. Last 4 starts, the season average is 6.1. Prior to his last 4, it was 5.3. He just was not using it. And I think Joel mentioned about a month ago, maybe a month and a half ago, he's got to throw it. And in April, he threw 40 of them. He's thrown 38 so far in July, or I guess now the month is over. He threw 38 in July. Opponents hit 333 against it, but the slider was playing better. It allows to set up his other pitches. And that's really what it's about. It's not necessarily about the changeup. It's about setting up his arsenal. And I noticed, I didn't think it was this big of a difference, but his changeup last year was negative 6.7, minus 6.7 inches of vertical movement compared to the average. This year, it's minus 3.5. So you're literally getting half the negative vertical movement compared to average, and then the horizontal movement is half an inch greater than average. So maybe the Royals did see something in the changeup in spring training at the beginning of the year, said, let's shape this up a little bit. Let's get a feel not just for the changeup in general, but the changeup we want you to throw. Now he's maybe feeling a little bit more confident in it. So obviously we're not in the room with Brady Singer, but it could be a situation where, hey, he was tweaking stuff behind the scenes all year. Now he finally feels a little bit more confident with it. And instead of developing into the guy that we saw last year, it just took a little bit longer because they had to basically strip things down a bit and then rebuild it some.
Yeah, I think there was some tweaking. I pointed out some tweaking with the slider a little bit. It looked like towards the beginning of the year he was trying to get a little bit flatter than it was deep. So there's definitely some tweaking, and I think there was a little bit of lack of confidence in that changeup. And being able to kind of rein it in a little bit with a movement makes a lot of sense to be able to get him to be more comfortable and confident with the pitch. So if that's what's happening, I'm all for it. If it gives him that third pitch that we've all desperately been clamoring for.
I mean, he needs it. There's no two bones about it. Like, he has to throw that third pitch if he wants to be a starter in the big leagues. Like, unless you're Spencer Strider, who can pretty much throw fastball slider with a very occasional changeup because you punched out 200 dudes on August 1st. Like, unless you're doing that, then you have to throw a third pitch. And Brady Singer is not Spencer Strider, so he needs that pitch.
Somebody needs to check that mustache for spider tack.
My goodness. Like, he made Shohei Ohtani just look like amateur hour earlier today when I was watching those at-bats.
Yep. He's the exception to the rule for sure. For my weekly takeaway, I wanted to kind of take it back to Friday night before the Grand Slam, before the game happened. There was a press conference that the KC Star wrote an article about. Was it a presser? I'm not real sure, but the JJ Piccolo made some comments about the strategy approaching the deadline, and I think there was some quotes taken out of context and really clickbaity. And boy, did it catch fire, because that again, the temperature of Royals Twitter at that point was very hot. But it's basically him saying, like, we're in a gray area because they have this young core up here. The farm system is not there. So they're trying to figure out, where they need to add in all places, but that was conveniently left out of the soundbite. But it did sound an awful lot like what Dayton Moore has been spoon feeding us about the trade deadline for the past 5 years. So I think that absolutely triggered a bunch of fans, and reasonably so. Like, how many times have we been sold on this soft rebuild, how close they think they are and how not close they are? So I think it was a little bit of, sensitivity to what's happened in the past compared to where they currently are. I mean, they have this young core here. They've only really been up for like 1 to 2 seasons where we're actually able to get a good look at them. So they can only really add on the margins, which is also what Piccolo said. I already said Dayton there, but everybody wants to say like that 32-75 record is not a gray area, which I get. But at the same time, it absolutely is a gray area. If you kind of look what JJ was saying, I agree with it completely. It was kind of a weird situation that the Royals find themselves in. I don't think they expected to be this bad. They've said that. And this young core is something we have to be patient with. So they are very much kind of in a standstill that they can really only add marginally outside of free agency, which we know what they aren't really probably going to do until they know what they need to add. So I think all in all, it was a tough night, and it was good to kind of get to balance that out with a Bobby Witt grand slam walk-off in the 10th. And I hope that didn't detract too much of that moment away from the Royals fans who got to see it.
Yeah, and well, like you said, it got taken out of context, because in the same article, he went on at the end and mentioned, like, hey, if someone in high A or double A or wherever offers some upside, we'd be dumb to ignore that. And then he came out on Monday in the Zoom and said the same thing. So, like, it was one of those things where Joel mentions this a lot. People just want to confirm what they already thought, and they want a reason to be a little bit upset about it. And Twitter, I didn't even interact with that article. I read it. I didn't interact with the tweet from it. Didn't really read other people's. I was like, people are going to be mad either way. It's the philosophy. He's not dumb, right? And that's just the easiest way to put it. If someone offered some upside at a lower level, he was going to be like, oh, well, we want this quadruple A player that's going to help the team win one game next year, and that's it. Or fetch another trade of similar value a year from now. So everything, and we'll peel back the actual what they did, what they didn't do here in a second. But it got taken out of context. People ran with it, and the logic was a lot more sound once you got more quotes, once you got more full quotes instead of the partials that people clip and put online.
Yeah, well, once we saw the kind of the peek behind the curtain after the moves with Nicky Lopez and Jose Cuas that we'll break down here in a minute, and he talks about those things, it makes more sense. And people that were like upset or just confused by the way that he answered the questions there on Friday were like, okay, that makes more sense. I'm willing to listen. Like it we have kind of proof of concept of what he's saying at this point, which it's better than taking something out of context on Twitter to confirm what you already believed, if that's what you believed. We're going to hit, some analysis on all the trades the Royals made over the last couple of days right after this.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network. Make sure you download our new app. Find it on the App Store or Google Play. Just search KC Sports Network. Entertain, educate, inform. KC Sports Network.
Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure to follow us on all audio platforms as well. We're trying to grow this channel as much as we possibly can. We appreciate y'all sticking with us. So the first trade that went down was on Sunday, about a half hour, 45 minutes after the Royals completed the sweep against the Minnesota Twins. Everyone's kind of riding high on Royals Twitter. We're like, hey, finally, we got to have this. And then it comes down with the Royals traded Nicky Lopez to the Atlanta Braves for Taylor Hearn, who is a left-handed pitcher, mostly a reliever, spent most of his career with the Texas Rangers, was DFA'd early last week, was traded to the Braves for cash, and then is immediately flipped, and now he's in Kansas City. He's on the 40-man roster. He's in AAA right now. So trading Nicky Lopez, on the surface, I think was fine. Like, it's one of those, he was kind of part of that group of people that, it was kind of that group of people talking about, like, if somebody's not tied down, trade them. He kind of fell into that category. He's still got 2 years of control, but he just hasn't been the same player that he was in 2021. Probably, at least it was kind of floated that he was possibly a non-tender candidate. So trading him makes sense, but trading him for a guy that was just DFA'd that you probably could have made a trade for cash considerations earlier in the week, to me, doesn't make a lot of sense. Like that, like the trade in of itself does not make sense at all. Like I was very confused after the initial chuckle that I got because Josh is going to eat ghost peppers later on the show, or habaneros, I guess. So I got a little chuckle out of that. And then I went, wait, wasn't Taylor Hearn just DFA? Like, what are we doing here? I guess might kind of have the devil's advocate point of that for the people that are set. Like, I mentioned it last week when we talked about the possibility of Nicky getting traded, which I didn't think was going to happen either. I said there's a good chance that the market doesn't value Nicky in the same way that the Royals do, so the return was probably going to be kind of light anyways. I just think if it was like a similar value guy in A-ball, I don't think people would be as upset. I think it was just the optics of trading for a guy that just got DFA'd, that just got traded for cash, and then you flip right around and trade a guy that's, a clubhouse leader, kind of integral piece, quote unquote, to what you were trying to do was just a little odd.
Yeah, and the fact that JJ Piccolo brought up or was asked, really, did you have other options on the table for him? He said that was the option. Like, if that's the case, that's the damning fact that you could have kept Nicky Lopez and got whatever you wanted out of him and then revisited it in the offseason or non-tendered him and moved on. Like, you aren't getting a ton in Taylor Hearn. And the fact that he was just recently DFA'd and picked up, and that was the only offer you had for Nicky Lopez, you felt that inclined to get rid of him. That's puzzling. Now, you add on top of that, Taylor Hearn, 4 earned runs allowed in each of his last 3 big league outings this year. In AAA, 3.66 ERA. In the big league level, obviously not good. He's also 28 years old, so you're swapping a 28-year-old for a 28-year-old. He's going to be arbitration eligible after this year, free agency in 2026. Like, you're not getting a core piece for the next core of Royals contending teams, or the next contending team, if there ever is one, within that 30-year window. We joked, by the way, after the World Series, it's not going to be another 30 years, and now they're going down a path. But regardless, I looked at Hearn's numbers in 2021 and 2022. He pitched 200-plus innings. He started 24 games. He pitched in 73 of them. He had a 4.89 ERA, 4.41 FIP. He struck out 8.32 guys per 9, walked under 4 guys per 9. None of those numbers are good, trust me. Then I jumped over to Jose Cuas, and I was like, okay, his numbers are worse, notably than Jose Cuas, but you can kind of manipulate and say, well, he's sacrificing some strikeouts for walks. The ERA is under 5. The FIP is better than the ERA instead of flipping it. Like, we'll talk about Tucker Davidson later on, and people said, oh, well, maybe he can be a Jose Cuas guy. Maybe Taylor Hearn can be a Jose Cuas, where he pitches to the tune of a 4 ERA for 30 innings next season, and then the Royals flip him. Like, there's nothing prohibiting them from doing that. The thing is, though, it's still puzzling because they didn't have to get rid of Lopez. If they did, I would have thought they got more than this. If Hearn never would have gotten DFA'd and they acquired him, that would have made the optics so much better. You can't really say, oh, we had an eye on him, we were interested. You could have got him then for cheap. So it kind of reeks of just wanting anything for Lopez to free up a spot and then, I guess, save a couple bucks in the process.
And really, that's fine. I mean, any kind of value that you're getting from Nicky Lopez this year is moot. There's no point in it. It's not helping you at all. It's taking plate appearances away from like Samad Taylor, Michael Massey, Michael Garcia, anybody who would be getting worked into that rotation. I guess Nick Prado is in that rotation now since he was playing first base for a game. But that and the money is not nothing. It is not much, but it's not nothing, which is basically how I feel about this trade. Taylor Hearn has the possibility to contribute next year. He has a spot, and there's the value. That is the upside. It's still not great upside, but it's still better than, in my opinion, what Nicky Lopez was going to do for this team. It was shared with us. I guess Josh Bernier kind of talked about on Fesco in the morning, talking about allegations about Nicky Lopez not necessarily leaning completely in and buying into the super utility role in this team, which I thought was super interesting because all accounts we had heard prior to this was he's a big clubhouse guy.
Yeah, that felt like, I'm not trying to put words in Vern's mouth, but it just felt like it was an over justification for trying to make a move. You know, like it just felt forced and odd.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly not something that we would have expected.
Right.
But I in that interview, he doubled and tripled down on it. I mean, at least like the thought of it. I don't think he actually came out and said that was actually happening, but he was planning to play in the hypothetical game a little bit. And if there is truth to that, and how could you not? If you're Nicky Lopez, you've been on the club for like 2 or 3 seasons. Your team is 28-75. They're one of the worst offenses in the league. How could you not feel like you're a little bit better than what's being put out there in front of you? So I can totally understand why you would feel that way. And if that becomes an issue, then it would make sense why you would be looked to be moved. We saw from the outside of the organization that he was not only a non-tender candidate, but it made a lot of sense to non-tender him next year. So if that was the plan, if there was an attitude problem, then it made a lot of sense to work a deal out with him. The optics, like we've said, are looking terrible. Super egg on JJ's face on that front, especially because Annie was talking about they had the chance to put in a claim on him, and she said they didn't. So they didn't even try to at that point, which is even further confusing at this point. But if he was the only option, truly, it makes sense that they would pull the trigger on him. Because like I said, in my opinion, I think that Taylor Hearn adds more upside to this team next year than Nicky Lopez would have.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes, especially if Hearn comes up to the big leagues at any point. Interesting note, just for while we're recording, the Royals are in the middle of the game against the Mets. I don't know if you guys saw it, but Zach Greinke started this game. Alec Marsh is coming out of the bullpen, and he's pitching currently. Sounds like there's a possibility that Cole Reagans takes Ryan Yarborough's spot in the rotation at some point. And his start in Omaha would be tomorrow. So that could be a move that we see. So we'll keep an eye on that. Moving on to the Jose Cuas deal, which not a guy that was on my radar for who was going to be moved at all. I saw that one on Monday evening and was very like, oh, they made a move. And my thought, here's just my general thought. And they traded him to the Chicago Cubs for Nelson Velasquez, who is an outfielder. He is 24 years old, still got about 4 years of control, cup of coffee in the big leagues for the most part, 77 games in 2022, 87 weighted runs created plus, 145 in a small sample, but hit 16 homers in AAA. So there's some significant raw power there. It sounds like defense is not necessarily a concern. It's about league average roughly. And I'm sure you all know who I'm referring to, who I'll probably take at bats from. my opinion on this is pretty simple. They got someone with a pulse for Jose Cuas. That's great process. Like, that is a great job by JJ and company to make that move, to get a controllable, right-handed hitting, power hitting outfielder. Good enough for me. Like, good luck and Godspeed to Jose Cuas in Chicago. Hopefully he gets to help him on a playoff run. That's all I got.
Yeah, I completely agree. It was like you said, not on my radar as much. I thought it was a possibility. I wasn't going to fight it if they found a good match, and it seems like they did. I like Nelson Velasquez quite a bit. Like you said, solid pop, solid plate discipline. He does have some whiff in there, but you're not going to find a power hitter that doesn't have that. He still has a
Correct.
good, idea of the strike zone, which is good. And he plays, I'm going to put it in quotation marks, plays all three outfield positions, because none of them are very well. He's got a strong arm. He's athletic. He's got decent speed. And it's a quad A guy. I mean, he's the fringe guy that you might have scratched an itch to where JJ was like, okay, we got my fringe guy. We could go somewhere else with this. But the thing I wanted to kind of point out is Cuas was really, really good without runners on base. When he got a clean inning, he was efficient. And Q likes to use him. He liked to use him as a fireman role. Not great. He allowed 56% of his inherited runners to score.
Wolf. I didn't realize it was that bad. Oh,
that's crazy. Yeah.
I was like,
nuts. That's bad, but is that real? Yeah, it's real.
You'd flip a coin and then you're like, well, fuck, because it's still 6% more likely than that.
Yeah, somehow more likely than that. But I like Cuas. It was an awesome story. I love the fact that he was able to make his debut with the Royals.
Correct.
And kind of got his shine as a Royal. But they got potentially, according to Baseball Savant, one of the player comps to Nelson Velasquez was 2022 Jorge Soler. So that makes a lot of sense. Kind of profile the same. I think Jorge Soler is built a little bit different as far as the structure goes. But if that's the comp, if there's reason to believe that could be a possibility, a range of outcomes for Nelson Velasquez, giddy up. I love this trade.
And really, at the least, could you just be getting a younger, maybe a little bit more athletic, maybe a more trump card with the raw power than Edward Olivares right now? And that was my thought. I was like, okay, well, if they flip him, they get younger there, they can reset that and maybe handle it the right way this time and not try him in center field, put him in a corner outfield spot, see if he can hold his own on defense, see if the raw power will play. That was my first thought. And the upside with him, he still hasn't had a ton of big league experience. Like Nelson Velasquez is still somewhat of an unknown quality. And if the Royals can get him to hone in, and the strikeout numbers are ironically down, but he's still like chasing a shit ton and like kind of going after pitches that he shouldn't. But if he can walk 9% of the time, which he's been pretty consistent the past few years about, keep the strikeout numbers around 25%, keep the weighted runs created plus around 100, but offer some occasional pop, that gives the Royals a rotational outfielder with pop. And there's value in that for a guy in Jose Cuas. Yeah, he had team control, but like I said time and time again on this pod, I was always waiting for the other shoe to drop with him. Not extremely trustworthy unless nobody was on base. So to get Velasquez back, that was probably a better return than I thought the Royals would get for Jose Cuas. And even if he doesn't pan out, it's a worthwhile investment, I think.
Yeah, like it goes back to the like hashtag trade your relievers. And the Cubs saw something in Jose Cuas. Cool. What can we get for you? Peanuts? Awesome. Let's go and make that move. And I think Velasquez, at least, there's enough right-handed power there, which is something that JJ talked about with another deal later on, where it was the Ryan Yarbrough deal, that they're looking for that because they just don't have a ton of it. They have left-handed power. They don't have a ton of right-handed power outside of Bobby and Salvi. So, I guess we'll see what happens. He drove a dagger into my heart earlier this year after the Mariners were up 7-0, hit a grand slam to put the Cubs up 8-7. And so that I was like, why does that name sound familiar? And then I saw the clip. You sent me the clip. I was like, oh God. Yep. I remember that.
It's like the Vietnam meme.
I was like, oh man, that's tough scenes.
I remember owning Nelson Velasquez in fantasy last year. I was in dire straits and I had him. He was fantasy ownable for a while.
All right. early this morning, the Royals made on Tuesday morning, the Royals made a trade with the Angels to get Tucker Davidson. Shout out to all-time Royal cash considerations for helping make this deal possible. He's interesting. Like, there's not like when you look at the stats on the surface, it's like career 6 ERA, some starting experience, some reliever experience, nothing spectacular, but he spins the shit out of the ball and loves throwing a slider, loves throwing a sweeper. In a limited role, this is the perfect type of process move where it's like I'm pretty sure there's a pretty decent like discrepancy in ERA versus FIP as well with him. Doesn't give up a ton of hard contact. So I'm like, why not? Like, it's the perfect type of move for the Royals to make in this type of season. And there's still some control there. The caveat there is that he is out of options. So it has to work at the big league level or it's a DFA or outright release. And he's already, he got DFA'd I'm pretty sure got DFA'd by Atlanta and then picked up by the Angels. And then he got DFA'd by the Angels and the Royals picked him up in that trade for cash. But, why not? I mean, I think they need another lefty in the bullpen. That's where he's going to be. Let's give it a shot and see what happens. I think there's enough there to like that. If he's able to find something with his slider and make that a super effective pitch, like he loves to throw, is he can throw it to all parts of the zone, and when he's on, it's a nasty off. It's just the fastball sucks, which is hey, a Royals pitcher with a very generic, terrible fastball. That sounds about right,
especially from the left side.
Yep, especially from the left side.
Yeah, it's 6.54 ERA. 4.91 expected ERA, a 3.37 FIP this year. That's ridiculous. He's giving up like a 4.12 BABIP, I think. Yeah, 4.12 is the BABIP this year. AAA 4.59 ERA last year. Last year at the big league level, 6.75 ERA. The expected ERA was still almost 200 points lower. Really, it comes down to me. What is the sweeper going to take? Like, what form is that going to take in his arsenal? He's thrown it 7% of the time. This year, it's a brand new pitch for him. In 2023, opponents are hitting 182 against it. So if he can get that sweeper and hone it in, throw that four-seam fastball a little bit less, he throws it 35% of the time right now. It's just subjectively not a good pitch. The velo isn't there. The spin isn't there for that specific one. The slider, man, though, it can be, like Joel said, when it's on, it's on. And again, we mentioned earlier, this guy could be Jose Cuas. This guy might be able to be Jose Cuas too. Like the Angels basically, and cash is not nothing, but still basically dumped Davidson on the Royals' doorstep and said, hey, here's a lost Davidson. Do you want to take him in? And they said, well, sure, why not? And regardless of the options, regardless of the age, he's 27 years old. Again, this is a theme with the Royals making these low investment moves. It's worth a shot because you don't know what the upside could be. And the downside is it doesn't pan out, but you didn't really give up a ton in order to get it anyway.
Yep. Maybe he is, maybe he isn't. Who cares? I mean, it's worth a roll of the dice for sure. The other part about this is I wanted to know that if he throws such a good slider, I wonder if he could pass on some knowledge transfer to some of these other guys to give him some, help out with. I mean, Chris Bubich and Daniel Lynch both throwing that left-handed slider could probably use a little bit of tweaking.
Austin Cox, Cole Reagans. Cole Reagans would actually be a great one because he needs something other than that change. Because fastball changeup command, good, but it's kind of similar to like I think I was talking about with my buddy Alex, and it was like it's great when it's on like Danny Duffy, but when you don't have that horizontal offering, it's like it's kind of easy to pick up. So it's kind of a great equalizer there.
Yeah. So I was kind of hoping maybe this is like a knowledge transfer move. Again, that's kind of an upside to the situation too. There's no downside to this whatsoever unless he's a problem in the clubhouse, and then you cut him loose and it's no harm, no foul. So I think that's it was a solid deal. The only caveat is that there's a 0% chance that I'm never not going to call him Tucker Carlson instead of Tucker Davidson. So apologies to Tucker for when I do that in the future.
Still not the worst Tucker that I know personally. In any way, yeah, that's he isn't listening anyway. And if he is, I hope that you got a kick out of that.
He's nursing a hangover, I'm sure, from the golf tournament.
Oh man.
Oh God. We got a couple more moves to talk about, but we'll hit those on the other side of this break.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network. Make sure you download our new app. Find it on the App Store or Google Play. Just search KC Sports Network. Entertain, educate, inform. KC Sports Network.
Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. So we talked a little bit about this in the open, that 5 o'clock hit and the Royals hadn't moved Scott Barlow. They hadn't moved Ryan Yarbrough. There were some other guys that were named by Mark Feinsand. Taylor Clark and Edward Olivares were a couple others that were listed. And we saw nothing. And that's when everyone started losing their collective friggin' minds. And then at about 4:20, 4:25, after we had all fired off our "what the hell are the Royals doing" tweets, Ryan Yarbrough was traded to the Los Angeles Dodgers for infielder Devin Mann and infield outfielder Derlin Figueroa. So Devin Mann is their 29th rated prospect via MLB Pipeline. That was in the preseason rankings. He's 26 years old in AAA, kind of a post-height move, but he's pretty much hit everywhere he's been at the minor league level. Rookie ball, it was 124, A ball 133, AA across 2 seasons, 111, 121. AAA last year, 109, 125 weighted runs created plus this year in AAA. Walking 13% of the time, 14 homers. So there's some power production there. I seem to like the approach. JJ mentioned it's just a simple right-handed approach. There's some power from that side. He can play a bunch of different positions. He's played all over the infield. There's probably some opportunity for him to play the outfield too. I don't know where he slots in, but this feels like a situation where Prado's out right now. You got Salvi and Matt Duffy playing first base. Obviously, Vinny's out for the year. If there's an opportunity where it's just you cut ties with somebody, you bring up Devin Mann and just go, hey, go play first base for us for a month and a half, and let's see if you're a part of something or if you're just org depth in AAA, and we'll call you up in a pinch. The other kid, Derlin Figueroa, he's still in the complex. He's 19 years old. This is a stateside debut this year. Only played 31 games. 94 weighted runs created plus. Some legit power from the left side. He is, let me see, size 6 foot 163. So he's not a big dude, but he generates a lot of power, good bat speed, sweet swing. I don't know what to make of it. It's obviously kind of a lottery ticket because he's so young, but another intriguing thing, 17 years old or 19 years old, and he's got a 17% walk rate there in the complex. At multiple stops in the Dominican Summer League, 16.2 and 14.3. So solid knowledge of the zone, which is something that the Royals need. They need guys that can take those type of plate appearances. So I'll be interested to see how that one pans out.
Yeah, the thing about this was it kind of reminded me of the Brent Rooker trade last year. It seems like Mann is a little bit Rookerish. Not real quite sure where he's playing defensively, but the bat is pretty good. At least what we've seen in the minors. Who's to say what happens to the major league? Maybe you have Frank Schwindel, or maybe you have Brent Rooker apparently in Oakland. Who knows what you have in those? But we got a month and a half to find out. Matt Duffy, I don't think your services are needed any longer on this roster. But if whatever they decide to do there is kind of what it is. But the other part about this, and it kind of goes back to the Nelson Velasquez, is they got 3 guys with legitimate power that have good approaches, and it's not some weak swinging middle infielder, which is what it seemed like Dayton Moore always targeted. He always wanted the athletic, small dude up the middle, no power, really good glove. It seemed like that was always the prototype that he targeted. And if this is the case where JJ is going to say, okay, we could do that to an extent, but we really need power, we need approach. If that's what we're targeting from now on, I am so in on that, because that is what this team, this offense specifically, has been missing for like the last 10 years is some power and some approach. So if that's a new direction, if that's really the new target, or if that just happens to be the guys that are on the table, then fine. But at least they got some of that this year with these couple deals for sure.
You guys both hit the nail on the head with the eval on both players. And like, I'm not going to lie and say, oh yeah, I was an expert on Figueroa and Mann before today. As we're recording, I wasn't, but we had been following Ryan Yarbrough, the guy they gave up for them all year long. He wasn't as good as he's been in his last 4 starts, with 24 innings pitched and 15 strikeouts, 2 walks, ERA right around 2. He might not have even been as good as the 4.24 ERA he had on the season. He's under club control for 1 more year. Sure, that's fine, whatever. Again, this is about the Royals taking guys that aren't going to be around long-term and be around for the next iteration of the team that actually matters, and getting guys that might. Now, Devin Mann, he's probably going to be that quad A type guy that can fill in a pinch, but every org kind of needs a guy or two like that can.
Mm-hmm.
The thing, though, with Figueroa is he has a seemingly advanced approach at a very young age, and if that ages well over the next 3-4 years, that's a guy that could matter. So you're getting a lottery ticket again, kind of like Jose Cuas, a guy that you don't think is going to net you very much, if anything. The value with Ryan Yarbrough, maybe he is a positive player for the next season and a half. And you're like, okay, they got surplus value for that or whatever. Or maybe if these guys barely turn into anything, the flip side of that is Ryan Yarbrough in 3 years isn't going to be a Royal anymore. At the deadline next year, he probably wasn't going to be a Royal anymore. And if he was, I'd probably be willing to bet that he struggled a little bit. So again, you're flipping a guy that isn't giving you a ton, and you're getting 2 back with either a trump card or some intriguing upside or both. And that is just good process.
Yes, this was great process by the Royals to cash in essentially a lottery ticket in Ryan Yarbrough, because there was no guarantee he was going to get you anything. And it's not like either Figueroa or Mann are sure things, but you at least there are tools you can dream on with each of them. Like if Mann is able to translate that power, like you have a utility dude with some legit right-handed pop, and Figueroa is still young and figure things out, but there's some legit power there too. So it's good to see. The other one that came through very late was Scott Barlow to the San Diego Padres. He netted the 10th overall prospect in the Padres system, a guy named Henry Williams. He was drafted last year out of Duke University. He had Tommy John in December of 2021. So when he was drafted, he was injured. That's why he slipped to the 3rd round. He was a little bit better than that. But the numbers are not flashy right now. Like if you look at the, like, kind of shield your eyes to the Fangraphs page, like it's a 5.74 ERA, a 5.9 FIP, 40 strikeouts and 42 innings, 21 walks. Like nothing is special here. But the fastball, he can run up in the mid-90s. The Fangraphs has it graded as a future value 60 curveball and at least a 50 changeup, 55 command. So a lot of the stats right now is just coming back from TJ. And even if he's 15 plus months removed, 15, 18 months removed from TJ, it still takes you at least 2 years to like get back to where you were before. And so the Royals are kind of betting on that. And there is some inherent risk with that. Even though the guy's a top 10 prospect and you're able to get that back for Scott Barlow, this is very risky, but it could pay off and you could have a solid 3 in your rotation, which is kind of the way that that scouts were talking about him. The other guy is Jesus Rios. Who's the other guy? There was someone else that was mentioned and then immediately retracted. He was not part of the deal with somebody else. Yeah, something Baez. I do not remember the name because it was so quick.
Yeah.
Kind of a weird story, like good story. Jesus Rios was pitching in like Mexican Independent League and got picked up by the Padres. And he's 21 years old and he's in the Dominican League. So he's obviously kind of old, but this is like first like affiliated ball for him. He can run it up into the mid 90s from what JJ has said. They like some of the spin data that's available. So they like the fastball metrics, which is I think that's an encouraging development sign that we're not just signing generic fastballs, even though it's 95. That's good to see. So hasn't made a stateside debut again, kind of similar to Figueroa. It's a lottery ticket. And if they like the metrics and they believe in their development, this could be a kind of a diamond in the rough piece for the Royals.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest. This might be outside of the Lopez trade my least favorite of the bunch.
I kind of agree with you. Like,
it's so risky, man. Like Henry Williams, and coming into the draft, I vaguely remembered like liking his profile, which means like I'm vaguely remembering liking kind of someone's profile. So really my feelings were not too terribly strong, but I was like, this is a guy that should be a potential Royals target. And then obviously didn't end up with him and now did, as Josh also tweeted, coming off the TJ, having this rehab, are the Royals really the team to get him back on track? And with their new people, quote unquote, in charge, that could be Jesus Rios. I'm not really counting as anything, complete lottery ticket. Again, something that you need in just about every high profile trade like this, but you're really giving up Scott Barlow. And I think it's because Scott Barlow wasn't just a guy that appeared on the radar this year and had a good season that they got rid of. It was a guy that had a really good several year stretch, and then they were like, we don't want to get rid of him. Nope, we're good. Nope, we're good. And then finally, basically when it was too late, got this value back. So like, yeah, the number 10 prospect is like a good eye-popping headline to say, but like, is Henry Williams really the number 10 prospect? We aren't going to know if he can bounce back for a while. And I think that combined with Rios, it's not the best return, but it's also not as bad as they could have done. So I'm kind of lukewarm on this whole trade.
Yep, I completely agree with all that. I think it all depends on. I mean, JJ called it a rehab year for him this year, so just seeing what he's got in the tank is really all it is. He's projectable. He's 6'5". What is it? 6'5", 200. So plenty of projection there left in that frame. Just got to figure out how he bounces back from it. But like Joel said, the spin's good on his fastball going into the draft last year. He's got good secondaries to go with it. Kind of all, needs to fall into place. But happy to add Hank Williams to this farm system to see where he ends up.
I think we need to exclusively refer to him as Hank Williams until told
I think
otherwise.
have to. No choice.
Yeah. So any other thoughts here? Let's grade out the deadline here for the Royals. Jordan, why don't you go first? What are you thinking here?
C+, like a B-. Like, I don't think really anyone could go too much higher, too much lower than that. Like, they're going to whine and complain that they didn't move Salvador Perez. Those odds were always low, and I think something could come to fruition later on down the road. Cough, cough, within the next 12 months, but probably during the offseason. His caliber of a trade is something you need more time to set up, and you need more of a even ground. The offseason provides that. Carlos Hernandez, we made the case for and against last week or the week before. He still has plenty of control left. He can still be a player on the next Royals team that flirts with 500 possibly, or pushes for a playoff spot if he's around for the next 3-4 seasons. And then Edward Olivares, that wasn't going to net anything anyway. So people are going to complain about the moves they didn't make. The Royals did make the moves they should have. My thing is that the returns were fine for the most part. It was a fine, okay, decent trade deadline. The Nicky Lopez trade was really bad. There were some highs, there were some lows. It was I don't want to use the word mid because that has like a negative connotation. It was an okay deadline, C+, B-. They're getting like between a 77 and like an 81 for me on that 100 grade scale.
Yep, right there the same. For the same reasons, I like the guys that they got just because it did, like I said, kind of looks a little differently than what Dayton Moore usually brought to the table. I think there's an extra few percentage points to the grade on that, in my opinion. And the fact that he kind of sprinkled a little bit of everything. He kind of went from anywhere from the top to even the Dominican leagues are going to get some love. And the other part is we're kind of doing all this without mentioning Cole Reagans and Rody Cabrera, which we've kind of talked about, and we like those additions. So I think if you take everything all in all, Jared Perkins, our buddy on Twitter for Just Baseball, he kind of laid the whole shebang out, the whole slate, and you kind of look at it, you're like, well, Aroldis Chapman was, upside. It worked out as well as it probably could have, and you got something for him. Quas, didn't think you were going to get anything. You got something for him. Yarbrough, same way. Barlow could have went, probably brought you back a little bit more last year, but he was dealt when he kind of had to be at this point. So I think they did what they needed to do. I could have been fine with them doing a little bit more, but I'm also fine with them not doing any more. So I would say a solid C+, B- as well.
Yeah, I'll go with a B-, and I think I'm just giving it that because they made the moves that they needed to with it, which it was specifically Chapman, if you want to go back that far, and Barlow, and then the additions of Nicky and Yarbrough, who are guys who are probably not going to be a part of that. I think I'm okay with them making that move. I'm a little, I'd say, whelmed by the return. And so I think that's probably where I would go with it. Just we'll call it a B- and move on. Now, this is the fun stuff. So if you follow Josh on Twitter, and if you listen to the show regularly, Josh was fully convinced that they were not going to trade Nicky Lopez, and they were not going to trade Salvador Perez. And if they did either, he was going to eat a ghost pepper on the podcast while we are recording. This is something you need to watch on YouTube. So if you are audio only, you need to go over to YouTube right now and watch this from this point on. Well, unfortunately, Josh cannot find ghost peppers at Price Chopper. So we're going with 2 habaneros instead. And Josh is going to eat these peppers right now and then talk us through something. I don't know what's about to happen, but this is, I think, this is like our magnum opus of this podcast at this point. I'm not sure how much better or more entertaining we are going to get. So, Josh, take it away, sir.
Okay, so I got pepper talk that we're going to do, and what we're going to do is I'm going to talk you through it. I'm going to try to do it without drinking anything for it, and then you guys are going to try to make sense of it real quick. So I found an interesting stat that's somewhat encouraging. So without further ado, here we go.
Pretty good crunch sound. Little ASMR. Yeah, little ASMR deli fresh habanero pepper.
Okay.
Oh man. I can see the pain. Oh man.
I can feel the pain coming through here.
It's in the back of the throat. So I added the expected slug percentage with the expected WOBA on Baseball Savant. And then I found the difference between what their actual slug percentage was plus the actual WOBA. And then I ranked all the organizations, and the Royals had the biggest difference between the two pairs at 0.49. So they are actually underachieving to a great degree. And this is why we can be encouraged by the way this lineup is shaping up. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I think so. This kind of goes back to the we're losing the plot.
This is great. This is the plot, buddy.
I think it's something where I know Royals fans are tired of us by the end of April talking about expected stats and exit velocity and things like that. And I think we're at a point now where I think we have enough evidence that they're doing the right things. Like the process of hitting the ball hard matters. And when you're able to do so, eventually, the odds will be in your favor more often than not. So I think it is encouraging to see. It's unfortunate that we have gotten to this point in the year and it's still, the discrepancy is still that wide, but I think long-term it's a fine place to be. You're seeing a lot of it bear out in games. We see a lot of hard hit balls. It's just a matter of, are they hard hit right at somebody, or does the hard hit fall? And we're starting to see them fall a little bit more often, especially for a guy like Bobby, who has been in the 90th percentile of average exit velo and expected slug pretty much all year.
I wasn't following any of that. I was too busy looking at poor Josh just struggling away. But I think that's a good way to segue out. Yeah, really? You want to try it next week?
I'm only on probably about halfway on this ride so far, but it's not as bad as I thought it was going to be. It's bad, not as bad as I thought it was going to be.
That's a good last word to get us out of here on. Joel, get us out.
Yep. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. We will see you back next week with another episode of One Royal Way. We'll talk to you all then.